Great. Good morning, and for the South Dakota Democratic Caucus press conference on this Thursday morning. I'm Reynold Nesiba, State Senator from District 15, and I'm going to let the other folks to my left and right introduce themselves.
Good morning. I'm Liz Larson from District 10, State Senate.
Morning, everyone. Oren Lesmeister, House Minority Leader, District 28A.
Good morning, Representative Kameron Nelson, House Minority Whip from District 10 in Sioux Falls.
And I think I'll just kick it off with a few opening remarks this morning. As I was walking down here this morning, I ran into somebody who's worked in this building for a long time and said, you know, I really ran for office to help people. And that's why Democrats are here. We got elected because we wanted to come here to help people have better access to health care. We wanted people to be able to have jobs that pay living wages. We want to increase access to education, whether it's pre-K, childcare, K-12, higher education, our universities and our tech school boards. But so much of our time in this place is oftentimes fighting against these cultural sorts of issues. Yesterday we spent a lot of time in state affairs with SJR 501. And that's a requirement that would it would increase government. It would expand paperwork requirements for a ballot issue that that the people of South Dakota passed overwhelmingly. They talk about it as requiring a work requirement to qualify for Medicaid, but we already know unemployment in South Dakota is almost non-existent. We know that 2/3 of our Medicaid population are already using SNAP, which has a work requirement in it. At the same time, we have a child care crisis, and in just a few weeks we're going to be closing down the job service offices across the state of South Dakota. And it doesn't reflect the will of the people. It's not going to increase work for anyone. The only effect it's going to have is to deny people health care that they're otherwise eligible for. And I wish we could get back to the business here of trying to improve people's lives, and again, focusing on healthcare and education and improving protections for our workers in South Dakota. So I'll be happy to answer questions and hopefully about some of the bills that have been dropped in the last few days. And I think I'll defer to Oren Lesmeister.
I'd like to just piggyback off that some. So yes, ditto's same comments, but here we are in a situation where we already have people that are living in poverty. They're struggling to just get by day to day, and yet now we're going to make them try to have to travel and fill out more paperwork, jump through loopholes and stuff. We're a super majority Republican in the state, and all we're going to do is add more regulation. I thought that was kind of the backwards motion of the Republican Party. So here we are. We're adding more regulation, more hoops to jump through for people who are already struggling already. And yet we're going to want them now to travel more to go to the different offices and make sure they got this right. And as the good senator said, we already have a work requirement under the SNAP program. And so why are we adding duplicate redundancy again to this? So yeah, I totally agree that this is just not needed. This is not what the people of South Dakota passed when they voted on it.
On the topic of poverty, this week we saw a bill for school nutrition in our schools, narrowly defeated in House Education by one vote. Representative Kaden Whitman should be commended on the broad coalition that she put together over the last several months. Stakeholders from all across the state of South Dakota, school district administrators, nutrition services, advocates for access to food. And when we wanted to bring a bipartisan piece of legislation that would provide the ability to reimburse that additional currently reduced category, that above 130% of area median income, to be able to have those kids be nutrition focused and able to participate in their school day, which would limit behaviors in classrooms, helping with teacher retention and all of the things that school administrators have to deal with on a daily basis. Making sure that kids don't go hungry was something that we really truly believed everyone could get on board for, and Republicans in the House chose not to pass that through. So that was deeply disappointing, and we will continue working with that broad coalition to make sure that kids are fed in schools so that our investment in the public education system is held up and reinforced, and that it's doing the best that we can possibly do.
Thank you. I'll not repeat what you all just said because those are the top things on my mind as well, but I can briefly talk about a few bills that I've dropped in the last couple weeks. One is Senate Bill 96, which looks at artificial intelligence deepfakes in elections. And this bill counters the negative impacts that we see with AI, and it protects South Dakotans against false information that might be delivered to them in order to influence an election. AI deepfakes are kind of broadly defined as videos or audio or photos that are falsely depicting either a political candidate or an image around an issue that never really happened, but they're generated by artificial intelligence. So this can really mislead voters with giving them false information, and probably even worse, it can over time destroy the public's trust in all types of media, even media that's truly telling the truth. AI and deepfakes are also evolving at a really fast pace right now. So more and more it's accessible to Joe Schmo down the street who might just have a computer and access to some type of software that can generate this. The deepfakes that you see that were generated last year compared to the deepfakes that can be generated this year are like night and day. And none of us would be able to identify these types of false images just with the naked eye, and it's getting even harder to do that through other types of software. This is also an example of a very bipartisan issue. I'm working with Senator Johnson and Representative Peterson on a series of bills that is going to look at this, and it's just something that we've found is an area that we can really agree upon and partner in a bipartisan way. I think some of you might have read the examples that were given, I believe it was last week in New Hampshire, where there was an AI-generated robocall that was impersonating Joe Biden, and it was telling the folks of New Hampshire to not vote. Unclear what the actual agenda was behind that, but we are for sure going to be seeing a lot more of this kind of stuff, and it benefits both Republicans and Democrats to get a handle on it, to get ahead of that, and that's what we hope to do with those two bills. The other bill that I dropped recently is a motor vehicle exemption, and this will exempt $5,000 worth of vehicle equity, and it will protect that against creditors. So for South Dakotans who are struggling with debt, whether that's medical debt, consumer debt, business debt, debt to the IRS, or another legal collector, we're proposing this exemption to really show the value of what motor vehicles are in our lives today. They are necessary to be economically active. They're essential in a state like South Dakota. So whatever a debtor may decide, whether they decide to file for bankruptcy, whether they decide to go for payments, what we realize is that we don't want to take away their access to continue to make a living and service their debts. We also found, while doing a little bit of the background research on this, that there's a big myth about people who have significant debt, and that is that they don't actually want to repay. And that's been found to be not true. Most debtors actually want to repay, and they want reasonable ways where they can service their debts over time. We also feel that setting people back to zero still involves a car, and we don't want to drive people out of employment through servicing their debts, and we don't want to drive them onto government-funded services through debt collection processes. People can better service their debts if they're lifeline to the economy and their employment is not threatened. So that is what is the focus of Senate Bill 95.
Thank you, and I think we'll open it up for questions. And I'll start with Austin Goss.
Thank you. Austin Goss, the Scout SDBA. Representative Nelson, you on that anti-Semitic language bill this past week, I guess 2 days ago, you had an amendment that I think would have I'll let you explain it, but if you could explain kind of why that amendment what that amendment did and why you decided not to bring it. I'd be interested in that.
Thank you for the question. The question was the amendment that I had proposed on the anti-Semitism bill that we heard in the House earlier this week. In the hearing, there were multiple stakeholders from different communities who mostly provided some soft opposition from the perspective of, yes, we denounce all acts of violence and discrimination and hatred through the lens of anti-Semitism, but then what about all of these other groups who are experiencing the same sort of discrimination? So when we talk about anti-Black sentiment, when we talk about anti-Indianism, Islamophobia, homophobia, any sort of calls for violence or hatred to a specific group of individuals, that is the primary impetus of that amendment. So we heard on the floor, certainly from my perspective, there was a disagreement on definitions of that particular bill. Again, we support Jewish people and anyone who supports, who lives a faith tradition of Judaism. And I think at the center of it, if we are going to pass legislation that is already protected by current statute for our Human Rights Act and non-discrimination laws, and give them that win, make them feel safer by having our legislature say, we see you, we hear you, we support you, and we want to make sure that we're sending a message, as was alluded to by Representative Stevens on the floor, then we must also make a call to support all of the other groups of individuals in our state here in South Dakota, and make sure that they too hear that message loud and strongly, that the state of South Dakota also recognizes that discrimination of any kind to any people is unacceptable and has no place here in South Dakota. So, follow up to that, this morning I dropped a bill of its own. I wanted to be respectful of Representative Deutsch and the collaboration with the governor in bringing that legislation. We also see a Senate bill in the Senate to provide a definition for non-discrimination protections based on military status. So this bill will have a hearing of its own to include all of those other groups of people.
And excuse me, because obviously this is the first I'm hearing about it. Is it essentially that amendment you had just in bill form, more or less?
The question was, is it the same? It is very, very similar.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Jack Dura with the Associated Press. Senator Nesiba, could you discuss Senate Bill 109 to provisionally repeal capital punishment?
Yes, thank you for that question. It is the first bill that I dropped this session. I was happy to see Lee Schoenbeck clicked on that, and at least last I looked, he was a co-sponsor on that bill that will be up in committee on February 1st. I simply think that the capital punishment is deeply problematic across the country. It's historically, in some cases, it's been done really badly. Right? I think there's somebody being put forward, put to death this morning or today in Alabama, and it's somebody they tried to kill before and failed because they couldn't find the right vein. So he's been living in limbo for the last couple of years, and now they're trying again. But that capital punishment, I don't believe serves as an effective deterrent against crime. It's hugely expensive. It's difficult for the people who have to impose it. We're going to bring a warden who was in favor of it in the past, but after having it to carry that out, he saw the burden that it had on him and his staff. And so I just think this is unnecessary. I think it would save the state money to put people in prison for life rather than dealing with appeals. And so I look forward to that hearing on February 1st. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Follow up, you mentioned that Senator Schoenbeck signed on to that. That's kind of common in the Catholic faith and a lot of other religions to sort of oppose the death penalty. Have you ever heard from other Republicans who are maybe thinking about that bill?
It's been just a busy week of dropping these bills out there. I'm really thankful to Denny. Denny Davis, who's been bringing that bill. We'll have Art Rush back to testify on that bill as well. So we're just in the process of introducing that and reaching out and gaining, trying to get some additional additional support for that. For me, again, my faith life influences the way I think about the world as well. I don't talk about it much in the 8 years that I've been here, but I've been a member at St. Mark's Lutheran Church for 28 years, and first time I ever heard about eliminating the sales tax on food was in a mission committee meeting in the basement of that church in the more than 20 years ago. So yeah, I'm coming to that as a result of my faith tradition as well. So thanks for that. Other questions?
Here's a wild one for you. Recently, over the course of the last year, I think with the new leadership in the state Democratic Party, one of the priorities that's been mentioned is sort of contesting some of these seats that Democrats have kind of ceded that they used to maybe have a little more say in, and putting candidates in these seats. Have you guys heard anything about that, or with it being an election year, has there been any kind of conversation with the state party about recruiting candidates, and again, places that typically we haven't seen Democrats run more recently?
Thank you for the question. I personally have been involved with party leadership, Vice Chair Jessica Myers, our Executive Director Dan Allers of the State Democratic Party in South Dakota, to do just that, making phone calls to all of our different county parties, making sure that they are organized and recruiting qualified, brilliant human beings who really truly care about making South Dakota a wonderful, inclusive place for everyone. In that work, we've got a master list, and we'll be rolling that out here pretty shortly as those candidates are collecting signatures, making sure that they get buy-in from the community and have all the resources, whether that be financial support from donors or the optimism and support from hey, we got you, we're going to volunteer for you. So you will see that being rolled out here very shortly as we crawl toward the deadline for signature submission with the Secretary of State's office. But yes, thank you for that question. We believe, really truly, that there is better policy that is enacted when there is a robust discussion from different viewpoints, and we know that a large portion of the body of our work here in the legislature is agreeable to most folks. And for that, we can always get on board and work together. It seems to be a bit of the fringe things that seem to divide us in our current state of things in this world. And so when we continue to lift up wonderful, brilliant human beings who really truly care and are open to a discussion about how we ultimately get to the end goal of lifting everyone up, those are candidates, those are true elected officials, public servants that deserve to be here in the Capitol doing the work on behalf of all South Dakotans.
Yeah, let me just follow up on that too. The kind of policy proposals that Democrats are bringing forward, many of the things that we're bringing forward have bipartisan support. I have a bill that's going to increase the minimum wage in 3 steps. It simply matches what the people of Nebraska did through an initiated measure process. I think people in South Dakota at that bottom end of that they deserve the same sort of wage floor that the people of Nebraska do. I have a bill that would extend the amount of time that you have to report an injury at work. Currently, you only have 3 business days to do that. This bill would increase it to 15. I tried this with 30 days a couple of years ago, and that seemed too far. I'm hoping that 15 is a compromise that can be reached. I'm also going to bring a bill to talk about protection of workers that are working in warehouses, and making sure that if they're being motivated by quotas, being judged and fired on those quotas, that they're aware of what they are, and that there's far more transparency between the bosses and the workers. And so I think that the Democrats are also bringing forward a positive agenda. We keep talking about the things that South Dakotans care about. They care about access to healthcare, access to education, and being able to be treated fairly at work. And those are popular widely across the state, both for Republicans and Democrats. Follow up?
Unrelated, actually. This one just popped in my mind, and I'm sorry to pick on you, Representative Nelson. You voted, you were one of 3 people on Commerce and Energy yesterday to vote against that automated vehicle bill that is supposed to be on the floor today. Obviously, you never know, it's the last day of the week. I just was hoping you could kind of explain that vote to me, maybe what some of your concerns were with that bill.
Thank you for that question, Austin. So in House Commerce and Energy yesterday, we did hear a bill 1095 with Representative Roger Chase that really looks at how we regulate autonomous vehicles here in the state of South Dakota. It is a relatively new concept to the state of South Dakota, not new in the United States. We see multiple commercial retailers who are utilizing autonomous vehicles to be able to ship product to your doorstep in your communities, as well as for private citizens being able to have some assisted driving technology. For the large part, I do recognize that we do need regulation on this. Currently, it's been mentioned by the prime of that bill that with no statute, it's kind of a Wild West sort of scenario where any actor or company who wants to do business in South Dakota through AV technology can do so legally without any repercussions whatsoever. So we do recognize the need for some guide rails. That said, we also want to make sure that our labor unions are at the table. They discussed a work group that had been working for what has now been cited as 2 years about drafting this language, going back what's happening across the country, AAA, the Retailers Association, the South Dakota Department of Transportation, DPS. We continue to leave people who are laborers out of those conversations, and for that, I really had a problem with them not being at the table, for one, on principle, and then two, some of the public safety standards. We need to be able to require full access and transparency for any crash and safety data that these companies have. If they want to operate in South Dakota, I think the public deserves access to that information. Certainly there's a lot of rhetoric and more anecdotal evidence as a lot of that data is currently held as trade secret or private IP, which I think is reasonable to a certain extent, but the public deserves to know we must be continuing to embrace innovation. And so if we want that here in South Dakota, we have to be able to prove to the people that this is a safe mechanism to do business and to carry you throughout your personal life. So that's why I oppose that bill. I've reached out to the prime of the bill, hoping to defer action on that to next week so that we can work on some language over the weekend that is amenable to all groups, so that we are building that infrastructure from the ground floor together. We were not approached from the very beginning, and for that reason we oppose that.
Thank you.
There's a resolution, a joint resolution, Bob Mercer with Kettleland News. There's a joint resolution in from Senator Hoffman that would ask voters, if the legislature would put it on the ballot, would ask voters whether they want to change the state constitution so that special elections would fill legislative vacancies rather than the governor as it is now. And I wondered if I could get each of you to just tell me what you think of that idea and what you intend to do.
I'll take a first shot at that is that right?
Yep, go ahead.
I think it's, I like it in principle. For practical purposes, we have 2-year terms, and it's so hard to be able to do that. So, and we're in a situation now where we have vacancies that aren't being filled because we're waiting for the Supreme Court to give a judgment as well. So, I'm going to take a look at that. I think we'll visit as a caucus. I don't think we've made a final decision on that. My fear is that we are here for such a short period that we really need to have a full group of legislators here, and simply the speed of being able to have a governor make that appointment is important. So just the time it takes and the fact that we're only here for 38 days, sort of leaning toward that, but I don't know if we have a final decision on that.
No, we discussed it a little bit the other day in our caucus. The resolution at face value looks good. The other hindrance of it is those counties. It's going to cost counties a lot of money to run a special election, let alone maybe 2, in some cases. So, we got to take a hard look at that. What's the burden on the counties? How's this going to happen. There's another bill out there that I don't know if she's dropped yet or not, but there's another bill out there possibly to allow the governor still appoint, but also appoint the same political party that was in that seat at the time of vacancy. So if it was a Republican or Democrat that was in that seat at the time of vacancy, the governor could still appoint, but it'd be to that party, whoever was sitting in that seat, to that party's value. I like that a little more because, as the good senator said, we can react a little faster. She can appoint quicker than setting up and getting people to file to be in a special election, different things, and also to seat the party that was in that seat to start with. So it keeps it consistent at that point. Personally, I favor that a little more than putting a burden on the counties to have to scramble and hurry up and hopefully have a special election, because some people probably would not run that may be appointed at the time, just for the fact of gathering signatures, getting on the ballot, getting everything done right, and then getting through a county special election, or a district special election, multiple counties at times. So that's kind of where I lean with it. Like I said, we discussed it a little bit in our caucus. There's some different views on it, and we'll just have to really dig into the bill and see or resolution, and see how it's gonna work out.
Sufficient?
What do you guys think about for next week?
Be 5 days. That's good. So next week, truthfully though, next week is a 5-day week. You know, we are crawling up closer to crossover day. They're, pushing really hard for everybody that's got bills out there drafted and stuff. Get them on the docket so we can get them worked through. Leadership on both sides in both chambers, I think, has been doing a great job getting bills through committees, get them to the floor, get them worked, because we know there could be a tremendous more bill load coming. So I got to commend everybody for that, for doing their due diligence, getting these worked through. There's always bills, as the good representative said, we may defer for a few days because opposition may want to work with the prime to get something done. But for the most part, we've been getting them to the floor and pushed through, and I appreciate that because the last thing we want is, a few years back, crossover night / next day. We don't want to run into that again. That does nobody no good. That doesn't do the bills any justice at all. People get crabby. They start voting wrong at times just because they just want to go home. So I really commend the other side leadership for helping push, get stuff done and push through. So that's part of the 5-day week. Next week is let's take a load of these bills and get them shoved through, so we don't have that coming up on crossover day. So
I'm still watching what's going on in appropriations as well. One of our priorities has been a tuition freeze for our universities and our tech schools. That really has helped over the last 4 years to make South Dakota look more affordable compared to the rest of our region. I'm hoping that we can do that for 1 more year. So we're watching that, and I think appropriators are also now at a point where they're talking about how best to fund this prison. How much can we actually take out of the prison facility fund that we've set up, and whether we're going to have to do bonding or not. And I think some of those decisions are going to coalesce next week.
good.
Good.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks
Great.
everybody.
Great. Thank you for coming.